Paige Greer. The day my parents ignored my son's birthday, I stood in my own living room, balloons still bobbing like they didn't know anything was wrong, watching Paxton's smile slowly unhook itself from his face, piece by piece. He was 7 years old, in a red cape that kept slipping off one shoulder, his little foam mask pushed up like a headband because he didn't want it to mess up his hair. He'd been practicing his hero entrance all week, the way he'd burst through the doorway when Grandma and Grandpa arrived. He'd even timed it. He'd told me, very seriously, that he would wait until Grandpa knocked because that's how it happens in movies. At exactly 2 p.m., he ran to the front window and pressed his hands to the glass. No knock. At 2:15, he did it again. Like maybe the street would magically produce my parents if he looked hard enough. At 2:30, the party was so loud, I had to keep smiling just to hold the whole thing up. But Pax kept slipping away between games. I'd glance over and find him in the hallway, staring at the front door like he could will it open. At 3, we brought out the cake anyway, because 7-year-olds can only wait so long when their friends are chanting their name and the candles are already lit. Everyone sang, everyone cheered. Pax blew out the candles with one big, proud breath. Then he leaned close to my ear and whispered, so quietly I almost didn't hear him over the laughter. "Mom, are they lost?" I remember my smile staying in place while something inside me cracked. I knelt down, smoothing his cape like I could smooth the moment, too. "Probably traffic," I said. "You know how it is. They'll show." He nodded like he believed me because he wanted to. Then he looked at the door again. By 5, the last kid was picked up, the last paper plate was tossed, and my parents still hadn't shown. No call, no text, no apology, nothing. Just absence. Later that night, when Pax had finally stopped pretending he wasn't disappointed, I opened Facebook out of habit, like some part of my brain was trying to find an explanation that would hurt less than the truth. And there they were. My mom, Ida Greer, laughing with an old friend under string lights. My dad, Owen Greer, holding up a red plastic cup like the world had never asked him to be anywhere he didn't feel like going. A class reunion across town, time-stamped during our party hours. My son wandered into the living room, still in his cape, and asked one more time, softer than the first. "Maybe they'll come tomorrow?" I swallowed down the heat in my throat and pulled him onto my lap. "Maybe," I said, even though I already knew the answer. A week later, my phone buzzed with a bank alert. Declined transaction, $2,000 withdrawal attempt. And the name under it was my father's, Owen Greer. 3 tries in one afternoon. I sat there at my desk, hands hovering over my keyboard, heart thudding like I'd just been caught doing something wrong. Until I realized the only wrong thing happening was what my family had gotten used to doing to me. I pulled up the banking app, and I started cutting the cords, one by one. 44. If you've ever been the person who pays for everyone else's emergencies while your own kid gets forgotten, you already know what kind of anger that is. It's not loud at first. It's quiet. It's precise. And it finally says, enough. But to understand why a single bank alert pushed me over the edge, you have to understand what my life looked like before that Saturday. Before the balloons. Before the superhero cake. Before my son learned a lesson he never should have had to learn. Because I wasn't just a daughter. I was the system. I was the backup plan. I was the reason their lights stayed on and their subscriptions kept renewing and their car stayed insured, while I worked myself thin in a townhouse near a half-frozen lake, raising my son alone and telling myself I was doing the right thing. And for years, I didn't even realize I'd become their favorite kind of family member, the one they could take from without having to love back. 2 weeks before Pax's birthday, Minneapolis was doing that late winter thing where it's technically spring on the calendar, but the wind still bites like it's offended you believed in warmth. The snow had melted into gray slush along the curbs, and the lake near our little townhouse looked like it was deciding whether it wanted to be water again. I was in my home office, if you can call a converted corner of the second bedroom an office, staring at an endless spreadsheet for a client who always needed just one more update, as if my time was a faucet they could keep turning on. My job title was Remote Office Clerk. That sounds small, and maybe it is, but it also means I'm the person who notices the missing decimal point before it becomes a disaster. I'm the person who catches the duplicate invoices, the mismatched receipts, the expense report that doesn't add up. I'm the person who keeps things from falling apart. It's just that I didn't realize I was doing that at work and at home. Pax came home from school that day, bouncing like he had springs in his shoes. He slammed his backpack down, kicked off his boots, and announced, like he was delivering breaking news, that he'd decided his birthday would be superheroes only. No princesses, he said gravely, like that mattered. Only heroes. Got it, I told him, trying not to laugh while I answered an email with my other hand. He climbed onto the kitchen chair, grabbed a marker, and scribbled a checklist on the fridge door in the wobbly handwriting of a kid who still mixed up some letters when he was excited. Invite grandparents. Bake cake. Wait for friends. Then he underlined, invite grandparents twice. My chest tightened a little at that. Not because I didn't want my parents there. I did. I wanted it so badly for him. I wanted him to have that normal, warm American kid experience where grandparents show up with a gift bag and too many photos and a cake they insist they helped plan. But I also remembered last year. Last year, they'd stopped by late, dropped off a drugstore toy, took 2 pictures, and left before Pax could even finish showing Grandpa his new Legos. My dad had said he was tired. My mom had said they had another thing. They hadn't stayed long enough to watch him open the present. And I'd swallowed the disappointment because that's what I did. I swallowed things so I could keep the peace. This year, I told myself, would be different. 7 feels different. 7 is the age where kids remember. 7 is the age where disappointment sticks. So that afternoon, on my lunch break, I pulled up the family group chat and snapped a photo of the digital invitation I'd designed. Bright colors, a little superhero icon, Pax's name big and bold. Superhero party for Pax. Saturday at 2, our place. Hope to see everyone. I hit send and waited, watching the little delivered check marks appear. My mom replied almost immediately, "We'll be there early. Ice cream cake." My dad responded with the same thing he always did. No words, just a thumbs up emoji, like he was approving a budget request at work instead of acknowledging his grandson's birthday. My sister Holly texted privately, "I'm stuck with parent-teacher conferences that day. I'm sorry. I'll mail his gift ahead. Tell him Aunt Holly says happy early birthday." I stared at her message for a second, feeling the familiar mix of gratitude and sadness. Holly wasn't perfect, but she wasn't cruel. She had her own life, her own stress, her own kids, her own job. She tried. And then there was Reed. My brother didn't reply in the group chat at all. Reed did what Reed always did. Waited a few hours, then messaged me directly like the party invite wasn't the real reason he was reaching out. "Hey, you think you could spot me like $50 for gas? I'm in a tight spot." I should have felt anger then. I should have felt something sharper than resignation. Instead, my thumb moved on autopilot. "Sure, sending now." I Venmo'd him $50 and told myself it was just gas. Just like I told myself the electric bill I paid for my parents was just to help them out. Just like I told myself the water bill was easier if I manage it from here. Just like I told myself keeping their Netflix active was no big deal. Just like I told myself the car insurance was temporary. Temporary is a funny word. It can last for years if you keep saying it. After I sent the money, I went back to work and tried to ignore the small, sour feeling in my stomach, the one that always showed up when my family reached out. Because they didn't reach out to ask how Pax was doing. They didn't reach out to ask how I was holding up as a single mom. They reached out when they needed something, and I gave. Because that's what I'd trained myself to do. The rest of the week blurred together, the way weeks do when you're working full-time and parenting full-time and pretending you have a third full-time job called being fine. Pax practiced his superhero pose every morning with a towel tied around his neck because he didn't want to get the real cape dirty. He told every kid in his class that his grandparents were definitely coming. "Grandpa's gonna see my cake," he said one day as I packed his lunch. "He likes cake." "Yeah," I said, and forced myself to sound certain. At night, after Pax was asleep, I stayed up folding napkins into little shield shapes and baking sugar cookies in the shape of superhero emblems. I dipped into savings for the decorations, even though money was tight. I'm not ashamed to say that. I'm not ashamed to say I counted pennies sometimes. I'm not ashamed to say I checked my account before I bought anything that wasn't groceries. I was raising a kid alone in Minneapolis. I paid my mortgage, my utilities, my groceries, Pax's after-school program, his school supplies, his winter boots that he outgrew every year like it was his job. I had a little emergency fund. I had a little college starter account for him. I watched every dollar the way you watch a pot on the stove when you know one wrong second can ruin everything. And I still paid my parents' bills, because when my dad retired early, he called me like it was an announcement. "Well," he'd said, voice heavy, like he wanted me to feel the weight, "we're on fixed income now." My mom had chimed in from the background, a little breathy, a little dramatic. "It's just hard, honey." They'd downsized to a small apartment on the other side of the cities. They were always waiting on something, always catching up, always just need a little help this month. I remember the day I set it all up. I was sitting at this same desk, at this same computer, with Pax playing on the floor, and my dad had said their electricity was behind. "I don't know what happened," he'd told me, like the concept of due dates was a surprise. "It's just more expensive than we thought." So I'd logged in and paid it. Then it was the water bill. Then the car insurance, after a minor fender bender made their premium jump. Then the Netflix, because it's our only entertainment page. Then a joint account. That was supposed to be the smart solution. My dad pitched it like he was doing me a favor. "This way," he said, "we won't have to keep bugging you." So I opened a joint account, added him as an authorized user, and set up autopay for their essentials. My paycheck went into my main account. I transferred a set amount every month into the joint account for their bills. I told myself it would be controlled, clean, efficient. I didn't notice it wasn't just controlled. It was convenient. For them. For me, it became another responsibility I quietly carried. And the craziest part is, I didn't even resent it at first. Not really. I thought that was what being a good daughter looked like. I thought family helped family, and this was just my season of helping. I didn't realize my season had turned into my identity. Saturday arrived with that rare Minnesota spring sun, pale but bright, like it was trying. I woke up before my alarm because my brain had been running a party checklist for days. I slipped out of bed quietly so I wouldn't wake Pax and started hanging the last strings of balloons across the entryway. My coffee brewed, the smell filling the kitchen like a promise. Pax burst out of his room 10 minutes later, already wide-eyed, already vibrating with excitement. "Is it time?" he asked, still in pajamas. "Not yet," I said, "but we can get ready." He changed into his superhero costume like it was a uniform. Bright red cape, foam mask, a little chest emblem that he'd insisted made him official. He helped me tape streamers to the walls, standing on a stool like he was doing serious construction work. We set the cookies out on a platter. I mixed the punch, ginger ale with fruit slices floating like colorful little life rafts. I'd rented a popcorn machine because Pax had been to a party once that had one and had never stopped talking about it. The house smelled like vanilla frosting and warm popcorn and hope. At 1:30, the first car pulled up. Two of Pax's classmates tumbled out with wrapped gifts and excited squeals. More kids arrived in waves. Parents smiled and waved and did that polite suburban thing where they drop off, make small talk, and then hurry off to errands because a 2-hour kid-free window is gold. The living room filled with laughter. Kids pinned superhero emblems to a poster while blindfolded and giggling. We did a piñata in the garage when the wind kicked up. We played musical chairs with action-themed songs playing low enough not to annoy the neighbors. I kept moving, refilling cups, taking pictures, smiling so hard my cheeks started to ache. And every few minutes, Pax paused. He drifted to the front window. He scanned the street. He checked the driveway. He'd come back to the games, but his body was there while his attention was still at the door. 2:00 hit. No knock. 2:30. No knock. At 3, we brought out the cake. Pax's face lit up for the song, for the candles, for the moment. He blew them out, proud and glowing, and everyone cheered. Then he tugged my sleeve. "Mom," he said softly, "are they coming?" My throat tightened. I forced my voice to stay light. "They're probably just running late," I said. "Traffic. You know how Grandpa hates traffic." He nodded, but he didn't run back to his friends right away. He stayed by the door like he was guarding it. Like if he left, they might show up and he'd miss them. I tried calling my mom around 3:30. Straight to voicemail. I tried my dad. Voicemail again. I left a message anyway, because part of me still wanted to believe there was an explanation that would make me feel foolish for worrying. "Hey," I said, voice bright and fake. "Party's in full swing. Hope you're on your way." By 4:30, parents started picking up kids. Pax waved goodbye from the porch, cape fluttering, but his wave slowed as each car pulled away. When the last one left, the house felt too quiet, too fast. 5:00 came, and my parents still hadn't shown. Pax started cleaning without being asked. He gathered crumpled napkins, stacked plates, carried trash bags to the curb. His cape dragged on the floor behind him. That's when something inside me shifted. Not because he was helping, but because he shouldn't have had to. 7-year-olds shouldn't know how to move around disappointment like that. 7-year-olds shouldn't have to act mature because adults can't. That night, we ate leftover pizza on the couch while the TV played a cartoon Pax usually loved. He barely touched his food. I checked my phone again and again, like my parents might suddenly remember they had a grandson. Nothing. Then I opened Facebook and saw the reunion photos. My mom and dad, smiling like there was nothing else in the world they should have been doing. My stomach dropped so hard it felt physical. Pax wandered in from his room and stood there, small in the doorway, cape hanging limp. "Maybe they'll come tomorrow," he said. I wanted to tell him the truth. I wanted to tell him that sometimes adults are selfish, and sometimes family can still hurt you, and sometimes you don't get the love you deserve. But he was 7, so I smiled and lied gently. "Maybe," I said, and pulled him into my arms. Later, after he fell asleep, I went into his room to check on him. He was at his little desk, crayons scattered, drawing. He'd drawn a lone superhero standing beside a giant cake. No grandparents. No family. Just empty space where they should have been. I stood there in the doorway until my eyes burned. Then I turned off the light and went back to my office, because that's what I did. I kept going. A week passed. The hurt didn't go away. It settled. It sank into the daily rhythm like a weight I carried, while answering emails and packing lunches, and smiling at my son like everything was normal. My mom didn't call to apologize. My dad didn't text to explain. Holly asked once, cautiously, how the party went. "It was good," I typed back, and left it at that. Reed didn't mention it at all. He sent me a meme, then another. Like my kid's birthday didn't matter. And maybe that's what should have told me everything. But I was still in the old habit of making excuses for them. Until the bank alert. It happened on a Tuesday morning, mid-break, when I was sorting client receipts and trying to finish a report before a deadline. My phone buzzed on my desk, and I glanced down, expecting a calendar reminder. Declined transaction. $2,000 withdrawal attempt. I frowned. I tapped. It showed the linked card. Authorized user, Owen Greer. My father. For a second, my brain tried to protect me. It tried to rationalize. Maybe it was fraud. Maybe his card got skimmed. Maybe he got confused. Then I saw the activity log. 3 attempts, 3 different ATMs, all for the exact same amount, within 45 minutes. That wasn't confusion. That was determination. I sat very still, staring at the screen. My heart started pounding. Not fear exactly, but the kind of adrenaline you get when you realize someone has been treating your life like it belongs to them. I thought about Pax's face at the door. I thought about the reunion photos. I thought about my parents' bills that were paid because I set them up. And I realized something so sharp it almost made me laugh. They couldn't show up for my child, but they could show up at an ATM. My hands went cold as I opened the banking app on my computer. I clicked into the joint account, my careful little system that was supposed to stop them from bugging me. The numbers stared back at me. I clicked into the recurring payments tab, and there it was. The list I'd built over years without even realizing what it said about my place in my family. Electricity, water, Netflix, car insurance, and a few other small auto-pays that had slipped in over time, like subscriptions and a pharmacy refill schedule. My cursor hovered over the first one. I didn't call my mom to ask what was going on. I didn't call my dad to confront him. I didn't text the group chat. I just started clicking cancel, one by one. Confirm, confirm, confirm. The screen flashed warnings about service interruptions. It asked if I was sure. It offered me helpful suggestions. I was sure. I cancel the electric autopay. I cancel the water. Netflix, gone. I switched the car insurance to manual payment. Then, I close the joint account entirely and transfer the balance into my own checking, tied only to my direct deposit and my son's needs. When I finished, the list read 0 active schedules, 0 access, 0 safety net that I built for people who didn't even have the decency to pretend they cared. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the wall for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of my laptop fan. My hands were shaking slightly, not because I was unsure, but because I knew what I'd just done. I'd changed the rules, and families like mine don't like it when you change the rules. I didn't warn them. I didn't explain. I powered down my laptop, started a load of laundry, and moved through the rest of my day like I hadn't just pulled the first brick out of the structure they'd been leaning on. That night, Pax came home chattering about a class project, drawing Minnesota wildlife, something about loons and lakes. He asked if we could make spaghetti for dinner, and I said yes, because my world was still him. I helped him with homework. I read him a bedtime story about brave explorers. I kissed his forehead and turned off his light. Then I went back to my office and looked at my phone. No messages yet. No calls. Just the calm before the storm. And in that calm, I realized something else. The bank alert wasn't the beginning of my breaking point. It was the proof that my family had been comfortable taking from me while giving my son nothing. They didn't just forget a birthday. They confirmed a pattern. And now, the moment my parents realized the lights weren't going to turn on by themselves anymore, they were going to come for the one thing they always came for: me. I didn't know how fast it would happen. I didn't know how ugly it would get. But I did know one thing as I set my phone face down and walked away from my desk. If they wanted to treat me like an ATM, they were about to learn what it felt like when the machine finally says, "Transaction declined." The first message came the next morning while I was pouring milk into Pax's cereal. "Power got shut off here. Any idea what's going on?" It was from my mom. No greeting, no apology, no mention of Pax's birthday, just a problem she expected me to fix. I read it twice, then set my phone face down on the counter like it was something hot. Pax was sitting at the table, swinging his legs, talking about a spelling test he had that day. He didn't notice the way my jaw tightened or the way my shoulders pulled inward. I packed his lunch, slid an apple into the bag, tucked a note inside that said, "You've got this," and walked him to the bus stop like every other morning. I didn't reply to my mom. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Reed. He sent a photo, cropped, a little blurry, of a medical bill. The date was from last year. The caption underneath read, "Dad's stress levels are high. Doctor says this could get worse if things stay tense." I stared at the image long enough to recognize the format.
I'd paid that copay myself months ago. I remembered because I'd filed the receipt for reimbursement and grumbled about it while doing Pax's homework at the same table. Nothing about this was new. Nothing about it was urgent. But the implication was clear. Fix this, or you're the bad daughter. I saved the image. Not because I planned to respond, but because something in me had shifted.
Instead of reacting, I started documenting. I opened a folder on my computer and labeled it simply Family. Inside, I dropped screenshots of the bank alert, the declined withdrawal attempts, my mom's text, Reed's message. I added timestamps. I added notes. It felt strange at first, cold even, but also grounding, like I was finally looking at the pattern instead of drowning in it. Around 11 a.m., an unknown number called. I answered on speaker while typing formulas into a spreadsheet. "Hello, may I speak with Paige Greer?" A man asked, polite but firm. "This is Paige." "I'm calling from a collections agency regarding an outstanding balance under the name Owen Greer. We have your contact listed as a reference." There it was. He rattled off details. A credit line for home repairs, late payments, accumulating fees. He asked if I could relay information or assist with payment arrangements. I asked for the reference number, the due dates, the exact balance. I wrote everything down. Then I thanked him and hung up. I didn't call my dad. I didn't text my mom. I added the call log to the folder. By lunchtime, the guilt campaign was in full swing. Holly messaged me privately. "Mom's been crying all morning. She says you cut everything off without warning. Dad's pacing. They don't know what to do." I stared at her message for a long time. Holly wasn't wrong, but she wasn't right either. They did know what to do. They could call and apologize. They could acknowledge Pax. They could ask instead of take. Instead, they were doing what they always did, escalating pressure until I caved. I didn't reply. That silence lasted exactly 3 days. On the 4th evening, there was a knock on my door. 3 sharp raps. Too firm to be friendly. I paused my laptop, checked the hallway to make sure Pax was asleep, and looked through the peephole. Reed. Hood up, hands shoved in his pockets, eyes shadowed like he hadn't slept well. I opened the door but kept the chain on. "Can I come in?" he asked. I hesitated, then unhooked it. He stepped inside, glancing around like he was checking for witnesses. We sat at the kitchen table. He didn't waste time. "I'm in deep," he said. "Credit cards, subscriptions, dumb stuff. About 8.5 grand. He finally looked up at me. "If you could just help with the minimums, I'll pay you back. Monthly. I swear." There it was, the same promise repackaged. I crossed my arms. "No." He blinked. "What?" "No," I said again. "Not a dollar." His shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. I slid a piece of paper across the table, a job application from an auto shop downtown. "They're hiring full-time," I said. "Benefits after 90 days. Drop it off tomorrow." He stared at it like it was written in another language. Then he folded it and shoved it into his pocket. No thank you. No argument, just a tired nod. He left without looking back. That night, after Pax asked who'd come by, I told him it was someone needing directions. Then I changed the locks. I didn't announce it. I didn't dramatize it. I just made sure my home was mine again. Over the next 11 months, life settled into something steadier. The bills I wasn't paying added up to breathing room. I built a real emergency fund. I stopped flinching when my phone buzzed. Reed worked for a while. Then he didn't. My parents bounced between excuses and silence, and Pax stopped asking about them. His 8th birthday came quietly. We did space-themed decorations, rockets, stars, a bounce house on sale. I sent the invites out of habit more than hope. They said they'd come. They didn't. By 4 o'clock, Pax folded the leftover invitations and tossed them in the trash. "We don't need to invite them anymore, Mom," he said calmly. And that was it. No anger, no tears, just clarity. I blocked my parents and Reed that night. Phone, email, social media. I updated Pax's school emergency contacts. I drew the line all the way through because cutting them off wasn't revenge. It was protection. And for the first time in years, I slept through the night. I didn't wake up the next morning feeling powerful. I woke up feeling hollow. There's this myth people love to sell about boundaries, that once you draw them, everything clicks into place and you suddenly feel strong and free and healed. That's not how it worked for me. What I felt at first was grief. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind that sneaks up on you when the house is still and your kid is asleep and you finally have space to think. I grieved the parents I kept hoping they'd become. I grieved the grandparents Pax deserved. I grieved the version of myself that thought love meant endurance. For years, I told myself I was being practical, responsible, mature. I'd said things like, they did their best, and family is complicated, and at least they're not as bad as some parents. I'd minimized the damage because it was easier than naming it. But once I stopped paying, once I stopped answering, the truth surfaced fast. Love that only exists when money flows isn't love. It's dependency. And I had been the source. The decision wasn't one single dramatic moment. It was a series of small, unglamorous choices stacked on top of each other. The first was blocking them. The second was not unblocking them when the guilt hit. The third was deciding that silence didn't need defending. A week after I blocked them, Holly called. Not texted, called. I almost didn't answer. But Holly had always existed in the gray area, never fully on my parents' side, never fully out. She sighed when I picked up. "I figured this might happen," she said. I didn't respond right away. "They're not doing well," she continued. "Dad's saying you abandoned them. Mom keeps asking what she did wrong." I closed my eyes. "Did she ask about Pax?" I asked. Silence. That was answer enough. "I'm not doing this anymore," I said quietly. "I'm not explaining. I'm not negotiating. I'm not rescuing." Holly exhaled. "I get it. I really do." And for the first time, I believed her. After that call, I did something I'd never done before. I planned. Not emotionally, logistically. I treated my family situation the way I treated work problems, with documentation, structure, and follow-through. I backed up every screenshot to cloud storage. I enabled two-factor authentication. I changed passwords. I reviewed every account tied to my name and removed shared access. Then I went a step further. I pulled my credit report, not because I thought my parents had stolen my identity, but because I'd learned not to assume anything anymore. The report came back clean. No surprises. No new lines of credit. Still, the relief I felt told me something uncomfortable. Part of me had expected damage. That realization alone justified every boundary I'd set. I updated my will. It sounds dramatic, but it wasn't. It was paperwork. Calm. Necessary. Pax was listed clearly. Guardianship designated.
instructions written in plain language. I wasn't preparing for death. I was preparing for peace. At work, something shifted too. When you stop hemorrhaging money into other people's chaos, you start noticing what you're worth. I stopped saying yes to unpaid, quick favors. I stopped staying late out of guilt. I started logging my hours accurately instead of rounding down like I didn't deserve them.
3 months after everything imploded, my manager messaged me. "Have you ever thought about taking on more responsibility?" she asked. "You're already doing half of it anyway." I almost laughed. We scheduled a meeting. I laid out what I handled, what I caught, what I prevented. She nodded, took notes. 2 weeks later, my role was expanded, title adjusted, pay increased. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was acknowledgement. And for someone who'd been invisible at home for so long, it mattered. Meanwhile, the consequences I'd stepped away from began unfolding on their own. I didn't witness most of it directly. I heard pieces through Holly, through mutual acquaintances, through the quiet ripples that reach you whether you want them to or not. My parents fell behind on rent. In Minnesota, unpaid rent triggers an eviction process faster than people realize. Notices taped to doors, court dates stamped in bold ink. They packed what they could into my dad's old sedan and checked into a budget motel off the interstate. Weekly rates, no kitchen, no room to breathe. Reed bounced between jobs. A warehouse stint ended with wage garnishment when creditors caught up. State law capped it, but even capped, it hurt. No one called me to apologize. They called to complain, to Holly, to anyone who would listen. I didn't correct the narrative. I didn't need to. Silence can be louder than explanations. One evening, about 6 months in, Pax asked a question that stopped me cold. "Mom," he said, not looking up from his homework, "why don't Grandma and Grandpa like birthdays?" I sat beside him. "They do," I said carefully. "They just have trouble showing up for other people." He nodded, accepting it in the way kids do when you don't lie, but you don't overwhelm either. Then he added, "That's okay. We still have us." And just like that, the doubt evaporated. That was the moment I knew I hadn't taken something away from my son. I'd protected him from learning the wrong lesson about love. The plan I built wasn't flashy. It didn't involve confrontation or speeches or dramatic exits. It was consistency. It was repetition. It was choosing the same answer every time. No. No money. No access. No explanations. No guilt. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, my nervous system recalibrated. I stopped bracing when my phone rang. I stopped rehearsing conversations that would never happen. I started imagining a future that didn't include fixing grown adults. That future didn't require revenge. It required resolve. And that resolve was about to pay off in a way I never expected. Because when people lose the cushion you provided, they don't just fall. They reveal themselves. And in the final stretch, that revelation would change everything. Not because I stepped in, but because I didn't. The last time I heard my father's voice, it wasn't directed at me. It came through Holly. She didn't quote him exactly, she never did, but the meaning was clear enough. "He says you ruined his life," she told me quietly over the phone. "That you turned your back when they needed you most." I was standing in the kitchen, rinsing a mug, watching Pax through the window as he practiced shooting a soccer ball against the fence. He missed, laughed, and tried again. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel defensive. I felt finished.
He ruined his life long before I stopped paying for it, I said calmly.
I just stopped cushioning the fall. Holly didn't argue. She didn't need to, because by then, the pattern was impossible to ignore, even for the people who'd spent years avoiding it. The eviction went through. My parents moved from the motel to a smaller place outside the city, farther from bus lines, farther from conveniences, farther from the version of life they thought they were entitled to. They lived on Social Security checks that suddenly had to stretch all the way across the month. Reed's wage garnishment followed him like a shadow. Every paycheck arrived already lighter. Every attempt to catch up undermined by years of pretending tomorrow would fix what today ignored. None of it involved me. And that was the point. The strangest part was how quickly my body adjusted to the absence of chaos. I'd lived for so long in a low-level state of vigilance, anticipating emergencies that weren't really emergencies, bracing for guilt disguised as concern, that when it stopped, I didn't know what to do with the quiet at first. Then I started filling it with better things. Pax joined an art club. He brought home messy paintings of planets and animals and superheroes that didn't look lonely anymore. We went to the lake on weekends. We built routines that didn't include disappointment. I started sleeping better, really sleeping. Not the kind where you're half awake listening for your phone to buzz, but the kind where you wake up surprised it's morning. At work, my expanded role stuck. I wasn't just trusted, I was relied on. And for the first time, that reliance felt mutual instead of draining. One afternoon, nearly a year after everything changed, I received an email from a law office. It wasn't for me. It was a notice, routine, impersonal, about an unpaid balance connected to my father's name, sent to an outdated contact list that still included me. I forwarded it to Holly without comment. She replied with 3 words. "They're overwhelmed." I stared at the screen for a moment, then closed my laptop and went to help Pax with his homework. Because being overwhelmed wasn't my emergency anymore. That realization didn't come with fireworks. It came with peace. Pax's 9th birthday was simple. No big theme, no expectations. Just a few close friends, homemade cupcakes, and a backyard that echoed with laughter instead of waiting. At one point, he leaned over and whispered, "This is my favorite birthday." I smiled and believed him. That night, after everyone left, I sat on the porch alone for a few minutes, letting the air cool my skin. I thought about the woman I'd been 2 years earlier, tired, stretched thin, convinced that love had to hurt to be real. I wished I could reach back and tell her one thing. You're not selfish for stopping the flow to people who never refill you. You're not cruel for choosing your child over grown adults. You're not abandoning anyone by refusing to be used. I didn't get revenge. I got clarity. And clarity is more powerful than anger ever could be. My parents never apologized. Reed never paid me back. The story didn't end with redemption or reconciliation. It ended with something better. Freedom. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in it, if you're the one holding everything together while being told you're too sensitive or overreacting, hear this. Love doesn't require self-erasure. Family doesn't get unlimited access just because they share your last name. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do isn't staying. It's stepping back and letting people face the consequences of the lives they built. Because when you stop funding disrespect, you don't destroy anyone. You just finally give yourself and your children the chance to live without it.